Hey everyone. Well, I couldn't quite find any place to set my camera down, so I'm going to be kind of doing like an old school vlog where I used to just hold the camera in my hand. So I'll try to hold it as steady as possible. But I'm going to be blogging about my experience on the psych ward, and I want to talk about this because I know a lot of you have seen my videos and you're probably wondering, how can someone like myself be suffering from depression? I actually suffer from what is called persistent depressive disorder, which is a milder version of major depressive disorder. However, don't get me wrong, because I do have my flare-ups and my bouts where I do sink into a major depressive disorder. And a good example of that happened in the fall of 2011. It was around November, and it was right before the holiday season, the time of the year when I can definitely sink into some of my deepest thoughts of loneliness and be battling major depression. And so what happened is I was feeling very lonely, and so I ended up posting on some social media painless way, like I would post links to websites that listed like painless and easy methods to commit suicide, and then I would post like underneath it like, I wish I were dead, or I don't deserve to be alive, or I don't mean much to anyone, so if I were to pass away, no one would really care, or I would be quickly forgotten. And so it definitely brought attention to my chain of command. And so I was still in the Navy when this happened, and so I go into work the next day, and obviously my chain of command were pretty alarmed. They were quite worried, and so I told them that I was willing to go to the emergency room. And so what happened was I basically sat in the ER for 4 to 6 hours while they did like a bunch of different blood tests on me, asked me a bunch of questions. But during that time, one of my coworkers had to be with me at all times. This even included when I had to use a restroom. And I was even asking him, but what happens if I have to like take a crap? I mean, and it's like, are you going to have to actually like be there with me? It's like, yep, you're going to have to leave the door open, and I'm going to have to like see you at all times. I'm like asking him, doesn't this bother you? I mean, do you find this like a pain in the butt to do this? He's like, I'm just doing my job, just doing what I'm asked to do. And that's the thing. I had to have someone with me at all times during the ER before I was eventually transferred to the psych ward at Pensacola Hospital. There, that's where I really got a rude awakening of what a psych ward can be really like. And so there's two different units. There's what's called an open unit and a closed unit. Everyone goes into the closed unit first, regardless of how severe your mental state is. And the closed unit is where they house the more severely mentally ill. And when I first walked in there were people that were like walking like literally like they looked like they were walking like zombies. Some of them were like must have been schizophrenic. It was definitely a wake-up call, and they had me like undo any kind of clothing that could potentially be used to harm myself or others. I had to undo like my shoelaces, take off my belt, everything. The only thing I could have on was like even like your string to tie up your sweatpants, that had to be undone. So basically the only thing I had on me were like socks, pants, and a shirt. And you had a room to yourself, but all it had was a bed and bars all across of it. And you weren't locked in it, but it was essentially like what I would imagine going to jail, or prison for that matter. They only had one TV, and that was in the commons area, and you only had like your basic channels. And I had to stay there for at least 24 hours, and I was definitely given a suggestion because I wasn't like as severely ill as some of the other patients that were in there, and so I definitely wanted to get out of this closed unit because it's like going to jail. I mean, perhaps even worse than jail, because you've got nothing to do, and they feed you but very little. I mean, it's like very small meals, and it's only things that you can eat with a spoon. That's what I recall. You couldn't even have like any kind of like a knife or fork. Anything that could be potentially used as a weapon, you could not have, even if it was plastic. And so after spending 24 hours in the closed unit, I went on to spend another 2 days in the open unit. And the open unit was really not that much better. I mean, you had a roommate and you had access to like some DVDs. The selection was pretty poor. They had like one or two different activities you could do throughout the day. One of them was like art drawing was one of them. Another one was like sculpting, like I forgot exactly what it was. But then as far as going outside, the only time I was ever able to go outside was during smoke breaks. You know, obviously some people wanted to have their smoke break, and that was like 2 times a day for like 10 minutes. That was the only time I had to go outside. I had no access to any kind of exercise equipment, nothing. It was pretty much like being in a, I guess like a minimal security prison, if you want to put it that way. And so I basically survived 2 days in an environment, and I did interact with some of the other patients. It wasn't too bad, you know, in that regard. But a lot of them were going through some serious issues, probably even worse than I was. And the meals, you got fed 3 times a day, but the meals really weren't that big. And oftentimes I was feeling hungry even after having a meal. And so you really weren't fed that much. And then on top of that, it seemed like they were constantly doing like vital signs, like taking my blood pressure, heart rate, you know, asking me if I'm in any pain. And they would even do this like a couple times during the night. And I just remember being waking up like at 4:30, 5 in the morning, or like 1 o'clock in the morning, so that they could take my blood pressure. And it's definitely not a good environment to get sleep in that regards. So being in a psych ward is almost like going to jail, especially the closed unit, because you're in there with some pretty messed up people. And then the open unit, it's better than the closed unit, but you're still definitely restricted. You can't have any, you're not allowed to have any cell phone, you can't have any computer with you. You're pretty much left to what they've got in there. And you're really limited into what you can do for activity. So you got to get pretty creative. I ended up having to like do push-ups and sit-ups just to kind of have any kind of physical activity. I mean, I guess I could have ran in place to get my cardio, but I just remember it was like, for me, it was like being in jail. And I really hope I don't end up in that environment again. And I know these past few years, especially being an older student with really no family and really minimal support, has been tough. And I've had the cops call on me more than a few times. And I'm sure there have been times when I probably could have been admitted to a psych ward up here. And so that's my experience in a psych ward. Nothing pleasant about it. It's basically like, it feels like you're going to jail, and you only spend like maybe 15 minutes a day with the psychologist, and it was pretty much up to me to convince him that I was no longer a threat to myself, because otherwise I probably would have been in there for at least a couple weeks. That seemed to be the average time that people were there, like 2-3 weeks. It was like the average time. Like, there's no way in hell I'm going to survive 2 to 3 weeks in a psych ward, not getting any kind of exercise, being underfed. I mean, it's like, no, this is going to make my situation worse. So my opinion of psych wards is, depending on your situation, it can actually make you worse. And I'm going to fight my hardest to not put myself in a situation where I'm admitted to a psych ward up here. I know this city that I live at is not the greatest for me, being that a lot of the people around here it's like married couples, it's a college town, so I definitely do feel out of place. But I do have some methods, and I'm going to kind of start doing some more of these obstacle events, which I'm going to talk about in my next video, which I think will be probably my best avenue of making new friends, is by doing these Tough Mudder events. I think that's my best bet. Or maybe like going on some like cycling tours. That's going to be another thing that I'm going to be talking about in my next vlogging video. And so with that being said, thanks again for watching. That's a little blogging video on my experience in the psych ward. My next blogging video, I'm going to be talking about how I think that doing some Tough Mudders and just doing more kind of like group activities will definitely help, hopefully increase my chances of meeting new people. It's definitely a lot better than me trying to go downtown or to a bar solo. I can definitely bet you that would definitely probably not work in my favor too well. All right, peace out.